Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Rawls Group's Advancing Your Business, Your People, and Your Legacies podcast. My name is Kendall Rawls. I'm the Director of Development with the Rawls Group and your host. You may be wondering if there are any downfalls to holding off on planning. What the last year has proven is that there is no time like the present, no matter what's going on. In this episode of Planning Post-Pandemic and What's in It for Me, Kevin Gilbreath, tax partner with Crowe, and our very own succession planners, David Weaver and Hugh Roberts, discuss what holding off on planning could mean for you. Let's listen in now. Kevin, are there downfalls to a dealer holding off on planning?
Yes, there can be. I mean, none of us really knows what's going to happen next year with politics, for sure. What Biden administration proposals will get the votes or not get the votes. But despite all of that, the longer you wait, the more those assets are appreciating inside of your estate, and you haven't crafted a plan to do something with it. So I say the major downfall on holding off is that you're taking away, every year you're potentially taking away some appreciation and value that's going to get taxed and not go to either your kids or the charity that you want it to go to or wherever, and instead go to the government. So the longer you hold off, the more you're really hurting that long-term strategy of what you're trying to achieve. The other thing is, I kind of want to go back to some of these Biden administration proposals. Let's say, in an instance, all of them pass, that long-term capital gains tax rates for any taxpayer that's over $1 million go up to ordinary income rates. Ordinary income rates go back up to 39.6%. And then estate tax rates go back to 45%. So if we think about, if you do nothing and you pass away, and let's think about a $10 million, let's say a dealership, just for simplicity. It was a new point, the dealer built up the value, the goodwill in it is worth $10 million at that dealer's passing, and there was no estate tax planning done. And we're under this new tax regime with all these proposals that are out there. Well, part of that proposal is that appreciation and value gets taxed. And so just on the 10 million, even though maybe your children aren't selling that or have any plans to do anything to liquidate, they want to continue the business, immediately they've got to think about 43.4% tax on that $10 million to pay for the capital gains tax. That's $4.3 million. And then the estate, you subtract the 4.3 million out of the 10, the estate still has to get taxed at 45%. So you got 5.3 million left that gets taxed at 45%. There's another 2.3 million in taxes. So we're talking about, once you get done with it all, a 10 million piece of goodwill that really had no basis could be paying $6.73 million in tax. That's 67.3% tax rate for your next generation, because you didn't do any planning on that. Now we don't know that all those laws are passed, but that's kind of a worst case scenario. You imagine leaving your kids in a situation where they can't hold on to the dealership because they can't afford the tax bill. They have to liquidate it to come up with $6.73 million in taxes. And I think, even in the worst case scenario, there are plans that you can use, but planning today and doing something and thinking about that can help put your kids and your next generation in a much better place.
Do you have anything to offer?
I'm in complete agreement with what Kevin just said. I can't help but think of two situations. One, this is many years ago, and walked in and I'm getting information from the client, and he says, "I tell you what I want to do. My dad died and he was worth $500,000, and he was able to do everything he wanted to do, and they got it all out of his estate, and he was down to $500,000 at the time he died, and we didn't pay any taxes, everything." This was about 30 plus years ago. And I said, "Well, that's great. The only problem is you're already at $30 million. And so your dad started real early in the game and transferred and put assets into trusts, et cetera, and used vehicles that allowed him to live the life he wanted to live and yet not have his estate be growing taxably. And you have already moved $30 million into your estate. Now you're wanting to get back down. It's not likely to happen because 30 tends to get to be 40, tends to be get to 50, et cetera. And it's just harder and harder to do that. So the sooner you start taking action on this, the greater the possibility. In contrast, I think of a fellow we're working with now, and he's, excuse me, he's in his 80s, and he has a net worth of in excess of $300 million, and he has transferred well over 100 million of that over a long period of time. So the appreciation, and you know, he's still got 200 million in his estate, but he could be dealing with a $300 million estate today if he hadn't done the planning that has allowed at least 100 of that 300 million to not be taxable. So, but you don't do that just like that. You don't start at 80 and solve that problem. He started way back when he was in his 40s to begin to build a plan that when he's now in his 80s, he's made a significant difference in terms of what his family's going to have to deal with. So, you know, I agree with the concept, use it or lose it. If you don't start working on it, and it's a lifetime project, sooner or later, Uncle Sam wins.
David, what do you have to add?
Kinds of things that we're talking about today are all part of a broad-reaching estate and tax planning process. And just like I said a while ago, I think there are a lot of people who just don't want to get into a discussion about facing the I won't say the possibilities, because the possibilities 100%, but their death at some point. There's a reason why when we meet with clients and we are working with them about all the various aspects of succession planning, why they generally want to prioritize estate planning first. And the reason is, what happens if I get hit by the proverbial bus and I don't make it home? I want to make sure that my family's taken care of. I want to make sure that my business is taken care of, that it continues to thrive and provide for family, for management, for their family, and for the community at large. So I think, you know, one of the biggest things of not addressing these kinds of issues today is, you know, what if something happens? What if you were to get, you know, deathly ill? What if you're to die? It's not the topic that we like to talk about, obviously, but it is a reality, and it's a big reason to go ahead and be thinking about these things now.
Hope you learned something from this discussion. I sure did. Thank you to our expert panel, Kevin Gilbreath with Crowe, and the Rawls Group's Hugh Roberts and David Weaver for sharing your insight on the downfalls if a dealer holds off on planning. The next episode of the Planning Post-Pandemic and Political Unrest, What's in It for Me series focuses on, with planning appearing to be a no-brainer, what gets in the way of dealers taking action now? Do you have a question you want to discuss with an expert? Feel free to reach out directly to Kevin, Hugh, or David at the email addresses featured on the screen. Continue listening to the series now or come back for more. Each topic featured may want you to learn something new.